Today on the Billionaire Belief Show, we're going to be talking about scale thinking, playing in the billionaire arena. The reason why the A students of entrepreneurship are able to achieve the level of success that they are able to accomplish is because of how they think. That's the foundation of it all. It doesn't matter how good of a product we have, how good of an idea we have, if we aren't moving in a certain way, if we aren't imitating how the A students of entrepreneurship move, aka the billionaires, then there's no way we're going to be as successful as we imagine. There's no way for our expectations of success to become a reality because we're not even doing things, as Wallace would say, a certain way. We want to make sure that for us to achieve our goals, to become successful entrepreneurs, it's going to require that we do things, a certain way. We're going to have to emulate and imitate the frameworks, the mindsets, the mentalities that successful entrepreneurs are using. And as long as we do it to the best of our abilities, it's going to increase the probability of us achieving, our goals, to what we desire. It doesn't matter if we're just getting started or if we're a seasoned vet. In order for us to quote unquote break through, get to that next level, we're going to have to start thinking big. We're going to have to start thinking differently. So now that we got that housekeeping out the way, let's go ahead and dive into today's core topic. So it's 3 points I want to cover when it comes to scale thinking, and these are three points that I've come to realize are the difference maker. They indeed are the difference maker because now we have the ability to operate quote unquote differently, move a certain way, think differently when it comes to what we want to do moving forward because the digital society is the future. That's what everything is moving towards. And it's the wild, wild west still. You have the ability to go out, stake your claim in whatever quote unquote digital real estate you want to and build, the next generation of fortunes and value and problem solvers at the end of the day. So this is definitely an arena, a game you want to be playing if your goal is to be a successful entrepreneur into the future. I recently saw a headline that stated that by September 2025, China is going to mandate that all of the students in their educational system, nationwide, countrywide, learn AI. So again, getting ahead of the curve, getting in tune with the digital economy, getting in tune with the future. It's time to like I said, move forward, move into the future. It's uncomfortable, it is the unknown, but it has to be done. But again, now we can come into it with a more specific mindset. So what is that mindset? That mindset is this: scale thinking. So the first point is wins. There's a difference between small wins, big wins, and now, as I've learned, massive wins. So billionaires, the A students of entrepreneurship, they're looking to get massive wins, while everyone else is just focused on big wins at best. And in order to get massive wins, it isn't that you're doing anything differently than what you would do to get smaller or big wins. It's just more so the level of your thought, scale thinking. So thinking massively, not big, but massively. Like that's the difference. And when it comes to thinking massive, what that looks like on an application level, realizing that there's a difference between solving big problems, solving small problems, but now solving massive problems. There's a difference between serving small markets, serving big markets, and serving massive markets. That's part of what scale thinking boils down to. That's why billionaires are able to play in an arena in the sense that everyone else isn't, because they're focused on massive wins. They're not focused on big wins. So think massively. Like that's the level up right there. Thinking massively. So when it comes to wins, we want massive wins. We don't want big wins anymore. We don't want small wins. We want massive wins. Next, this is actually a good one because it touches on a story I remember from Rich Dad Poor Dad, where they were talking about having to bring water to the village, and one team went in and got buckets and just start ferrying buckets of water from the river to the village on a day-to-day basis. Whereas the other team, they built a pipeline from the river to the village, and then once they turned it on, people in the village can get water whenever they want it. No one needed to go get buckets of water to bring to the village. So that's life as we know it. If someone is just thinking of a better way of doing something, it's not that they're taking your job away or taking your business away. They've just systematized the problem that you solved. When it comes to whatever it is you're working on, think systems. So don't just focus on carrying buckets or trading time for money, or using your time to solve problems or to create value for others. It's about creating a system that's going to deliver value to others. Like, that's what it's all about. And so be system minded, be system thinking, and don't think that it has to be you that does everything. You don't have to necessarily be the expert in doing the work. You just have to be the expert in building a system that brings in the opportunities for people to do the work. That's the shift in thinking right there. So go from thinking you have to be this self-employed or employee that is a master at doing the work, to no, you just have to be a system-minded person who builds a system, a business system in this case, and let the system do the work for you. One school of thought will say that that's a bad thing. Other schools of thought will say that's how the world has been built since the beginning of time. There's been system thinkers, and then there's been labor thinkers. And so there's nothing wrong with being, getting your hands dirty and working with your hands and earning with your hands. There's nothing wrong with that. But just realize there's levels to life. And most of us, if not all of us, start off working with our hands. But at some point, there has to be, there is going to be a shift where working with your hands won't be as, profitable as working with your mind. And so working with your mind just boils down to building business systems, building systems that generate the value for you, as opposed to you having to go physically create the value yourself. Last but not least, leverage. So when it comes to the people, the technology, the capital, and the systems that you're going to need in order to make this happen, realize that leverage, delegation is another key component of it. But when it comes to your thinking, it's just allowing yourself to delegate, and letting go of trying to be perfect and trying to make sure things are done the way, quote unquote, you want them to be done, because only you know how to do it best. Again, thinking that you have to be the technician. There's nothing wrong with being the thinker, the operator, the builder, the architect, and letting other people do the work. Because the reality is, in order for you to really scale, again, you can't scale one man's labor. You're gonna need leverage. You're gonna need a team. You're gonna need capital. You're gonna need systems. You're gonna need technology. The level up here is realizing that if you build a system and then you build how to's that teach people how to use this system, then that's what allows you to have the leverage now to use technology, use people, use capital, to not just add to what you have going on or add to the impact that you're making in society, but no, it's going to multiply it exponentially, because now you got leverage. All right, so there's no exponential outcome, there's no massive results, there's no massive wins, there's no massive systems if there there isn't massive leverage. So on that note, if you have any questions, feel free to DM, subscribe, leave me an email, do whatever you need to do, and be sure to like, share, comment the video. All right, so on that note, make it a great day. Peace.